Funding for The Router Workshop is provided in part by Hitachi Power Tools, manufacturers of a full range of construction and woodworking power tools. In the second of a special two-part series, The Deck Table Unit, Master Craftsmen Bob and Rick Rosendahl show you how easy it is to make one in your shop. Bob will show you how to create sturdy, laminated wheels, while Rick reveals the secret to creating a perfect handle for the cart frame in Part 2 of The Deck Table Unit, coming up next right here in The Router Workshop.
Welcome back to the Router Workshop. Today, Dad, what are we doing? Well, we got a neat cart here to hold those tables we just finished, Rick, but it does hold 4, so we got more to build, I guess.
Right.
The divider's in here to keep them from skidding back and forth, but we got some really nice job here. We're going to make some wheels out of wood.
Looking good. And you're going to do some combination joints, and I'm going to go
That's
ahead and
what I'm
move
going
this
to
out of the
start. We got to get this bottom to fit into the back
All right.
and this front piece on. So I'll start with that.
I'll get this out of the way and let you go.
We're going to start with a 3/8 bit in here, and the 3/8 bit that I have is a spiral bit, and I need to set the depth on it. What we're going to do is cut a dado, and we're also going to cut a spot to fit in it, the rabbet. So we need to get our block out here and just check for depth. 3/4 inch thick material, so we'll just tap that down in here. We got it set 3/8 of an inch on a 3/4, that's halfway. So we'll tip it down, and the next thing I'm going to need is a fence. And this time we're going to turn the fence upside down because we need a nice clean line in here, and we need a couple of clamps to hold it. So we'll flip one on the back end of this. And again, remember that we set the bit down 3/8, so the space between here has also got to be 3/8. So we'll rotate it in. Remember, I don't have the router plugged in here yet, so I can lay my bar in there. And don't forget to take the bar out before you turn the switch on, or else you'll find that somewhere in your workshop. Now, lock it into place. Here's the thing we're going to do. This is the one we're cutting the rabbet on. So we'll just leave it lay here, and the first piece I'm going to do is the back portion, and Rick has to cut these corners off yet around and put a handle in, but I'm going to do this part in here, and I'm going to look just down it, and I'm just going to pass this through and put that nice 3/8 groove right inside of here. So that's what we're going to start with. Now, see if we can get some power in here. These plugs together, turned it on. Clean that out a little bit. Now we'll have a look at that. Bit stopped in it. There's the groove in it. Now we're going to put a tongue on the other piece on the end to fit in it. But we also had a front piece, and I'm going to run one through on it too while I got it set there. We'll just take this piece and run it through. Now we need to put the tongue. Here's the problem we've got. You've got it set up there, and the natural thing you might think to do is just to run this piece in. But if we ran it in here, the bit's rotating in that direction, and it's not cutting here. That's on a flush side. So what it would do is try to take you right through. So what we need to do to eliminate that, rotate that bit in it, and just move that fence up to the side of the cutter. Now we'll see. Yeah, we can live with that. That's going to work. If you notice in here, it comes out right exactly flush on the side, and that's what we're looking for. Let's just leave that now, and I'm going to tear down here, and we'll put a 1/4 inch bit in because those dividers was 1/4 inch Baltic birch plywood. So we'll just set up in here, and again, don't forget to unplug your router, and we'll unplug that, and I've got a 3/8 cutter in. We'll put a 1/4 in. Now, That's really tight in there between them 2 wrenches, but that's kind of neat that we can do that. Saves you pulling too hard on it. And we'll have another quick look here. I'm going to put the cutter in, and I'll rotate it around and show it to you what it looks like, because I've got to set the depth anyhow. So we'll pop it in here, tighten it down, and we'll rotate it out here. Now there's the bit. That cutter is a 1/4-inch spiral bit, the same as what I took out, other than it was 3/8. And this time, instead of going 3/8 deep, I think 1/4 would be far enough in here. So we'll just take a 1/4-inch piece, adjust that fence up here, or the table up here just exactly right. Tap that, it's just flush on the top side. Lock it down, pop it back in again. Now, we've marked on them things so we know where it's going to go. We got one in the center, and then we've got 2 of them spaced from either edge. And I marked them on the outside edge so I wouldn't make a mistake here. You might be able to pick up my marks that I put on. I put 2 marks down in the side here where the bit's to go, and we'll just bring that fence back. Isn't that nice when you set the fence at whatever angle that you need in it? In fact, I'm going to have to gain a little bit on here, so I'll set it back over this side. And there, that'll be a little easier for me. And rotate that cutter just so it's lined up. Set it in there. And pull that fence back. I'll check that again as soon as I get the clamp on here. And we'll set that down. And we need to fine adjust that a little bit. That should do it. Now we'll tighten it down. Check my marks. Just a little on this side here. Make me a little extra. I think I was binding on my clamp back there. Now remember, this is the bottom side, so don't put the grooves on the bottom side. You've got to put them on the face side. We're going to go through, turn it, and go through the other way. Okay? Now, we got the 2 grooves inside of it. We need the 3rd one. So, we'll just take and move this by, and we'll move this back out again. And bring our board back up. Remember, you've got your marks on it. You can rotate that bit if you wish, so you can see a little better. I guess I overcompensated there. We'll move it back a bit. That's one nice thing about a router fence. You can got a lot of leeway to do whatever you need here. And I think I'm right on there for now. I'll just take and tighten that in. Once you set it like that, always come back and check, because you never know if you moved it when you started it up there, and set the clamp tight on it. And that should be good. Let's just let it run. Now, you might have noticed here, when I did that, when the bit comes out on this side, we'll get just that little bit of tear out in it. What you should do is always make this about 1/8 of an inch wider. Once you're done with all your cross grooves like that, then go in here and just joint the edge off. You get a nice smooth fit. Well, that's so much for that. And what I need to do is hand these pieces over to Rick, because he's going to go to work and finish those up, and then I'll start on the wheels. And when I start on the wheels, we're going to use a portable router. That is, we're going to be on the top side. And then I got to get a wheel jig and things here, so we'll just drop that cutter down, lock it, and get rid of that router. Sure, we unplug it. Now I need a sub base in here to cover a tabletop. On the back side, we've got 2 blocks in here. The blocks in it goes inside of the hole here to hold this, so you don't need to clamp it. And on the top side, and you'll get to see this when I take it off, this is our wheel jig. We're going to use a 1-inch guide to go in here and route out where the spokes are, leaving spokes in at the hollows for them. And I've got it pinned up in here, and I got a screw to hold it and a center pin. So we need to move to the router. Inside of the router, what we've got in here is I've got a setup so that we've got a 1-inch guide, and we got a 1/2-inch spiral bit. That's what works with the situation we have lined up. Now all we need to do is set the depth of that, and we need the depth so it cuts right through the wheel piece itself. I'm going to show you that afterwards because we've got a piece of plywood laid in between here, and I'll tell you what the purpose of that is in a second. So we'll pop it down here to 0, and I think that we probably are just a little over that. We got a 3/8 and we got 1/2 inch, so that gives us about 7/8, but I think we need a little more than that. Let me just see what I got in here. In fact, that's just about right what I have set there. Sometimes you get lucky, you see. Now we pop it in. Here we are inside of a cavity working with a router again. Remember, you go from the left to the right. You go around like this inside of it. Don't come back the other way. And plunge it down. If you don't want to take it all in one operation, you don't have to. When I say that is not that the router won't cut it, but you get a lot of wood chips in there and you can't get rid of the chip load, then you're in trouble. Switch is in an off position. We'll pop that up here and lock it. And I think we're ready to go. Now, the next thing we have to do is index that to a new location. I've got a screw in here. So we take the screw out. And I guess you could use a power driver if you wish. Now, where does this go? You know, you're trying to figure out where it goes. Well, we got a location hole in here. You put the pin in that hole, and you bring it right up to there, and that indexes it exactly. And we put the screw back in. People looked at that and said, yeah, but we're putting screw holes into the wheel. Well, when we cut the wheel round, those holes will be in that track, so they won't show up. So you're okay. Now, this is just a repetitive thing. Don't forget to take the pin out of there. You can't run over that with it. And we got a few of these to cut, so we're ready to go. Now, we got to make the wheel round. We got all the spokes in it exposed here, so we'll take this all down. Now, in this piece that we have here, see how that rotates? We got a 1-inch hole in here, and the guide goes in the 1-inch hole, and all I have to do is just spin that, and I'll end up with a wheel in the center side. This outside piece I haven't got fastened, so it might move around the outside a little bit, but it's not going to do us no harm. The center is fastened. That's what we need the most. My cord untangled here a little bit. If you notice in here, it all packs in here with the cuttings inside, and that helps keep that centered on it for you too. Now we can just lift that off and we end up with a neat little frame. Now, what I've done in here, I've got a center point in it, and on the back side I got a screw to hold that wheel in, so I'm going to take that out and then let you have a look at what I got in here. Take and dump that debris off. This will bring the wheel free from the sub-table that we got here. Well, you don't damage your table or your router table. And we'll set that down like that. Oh boy, we got lots of cuttings. Anyway, there's the wheel. And the wheel's got a center point for your axle. See the little screw hole that I have? We'll put that inside against the cart side, and then you won't see that, and you'll have a nice clean. Now, what we need to do is round all the outside edges in it. While I set up to do that, let's have a look at Rick over here and see how he's coming.
Well, Dad's finishing on the wheels. Our next step is going to be making the back piece for the cart. And I'm going to start with cutting the hand hole out. Now, this time what I'm using is a flush trim bit, and we're using the bearing. So the tricky part here is you've got to set the height up of the bit to match your pattern that you're cutting. If you also look at my patterns that I'm using here today, before I get going and cutting them, is they all come out so that there's a flush spot on the front and the back. The only places that we have to change is where it's going to have a molded edge on it, or where it's a rounded side. The tricky parts that we're working on, and again on this side too, we've got a flush edge on the outside, and we're moving in only on the inside. Now when you're working on the inside, make sure you keep your fingers on the outside. That's a tricky part. And the other part is because we've got a hole in here, we want to make sure that we put it on before we start the machine. All right, I'm going to move it over on this side here and plug it in, and then I'm going to move it back in position and cut out the centerpiece first. So we want to make sure we're in the off position first, plug it in, and let's move our piece so we're comfortable with making the cut, and let's make sure we're in the dead center. Let's start up our router and let's cut out the centerpiece first. Watch before you get started that you're going in the right direction too. Now I just come to the edge to make that little piece. Now there's a piece in the inside, so let's let it stop first. Tip it out, shake it off, and let's dust it now so we can get rid of all this extra material. And before we start it and make our final cleanup, let's go ahead and put it on top before we start the machine up. And let's just make our last. All right, that's the hand part. We also have the outside edge that we're going to work on. And what I'm going to do to start on this, if you notice we're on the flush side of this, let's get the bearing on a piece first that's not to be cut. And then when we move around the corner, all we have to do is trim off the outside edges. Now on the top edge grain here, we have very little. The only place we might have a little bit of chipping is down on the side. Let's go ahead and try it. Come off very nice and easy. When I come along this back side here, all I did was slow down, so I just would come around the edge very simply. Now getting on these other pieces here, here's another one. We've got the edge grain going in this direction, so we have no problem cutting this one. But if I was to flip my pattern over and cut on this one, we'd be cutting down grain, and that's a bit of a tough cut. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this one and then take the two patterns off and flip the piece over. So let's do that. Another thing you want to do is make sure you don't come in the inside because there's no pattern on this side. So let's let it stop now, and we'll take off the pattern. Now all we've done is put a little small brad nail to tie them in place. It's from the back, holding it in position, so we'll tack out the pieces. And we'll set that one on the side here. And let's clean off the top one very simply. And make sure that safety-wise is when you're using these brads in your patterns, that you make sure you take the nails out. Because if they fall on the ground and then you step on them, you're going to get to feel that. And you don't necessarily want to do that. So we want to flip over our pattern here now. And we're going to put it back in place. Now remember what I said before. We want flush on this side, flush on the side. So it's easy to line up your pattern. Because you've got a flush trim bit, you're going to flush it in position. We'll get it put in place. And now when we make the cut, we're tight down in place. We're running up the grain, so it's not going to tear out on us. So let's go ahead and finish this one now. Peel it off, and let's take a closer look at this. Well, thought maybe we could just take those brads, but they're very close. And twist it around. And again, like I said, use your own advice, Rick. Make sure when you're using small brads in patterns that you pound them back or take them right out of your piece. That one there got bent over. And what we're going to have to do here is get that thing. It's windy in here today. All right, now what we need to do is mold the edges. I'm going to change a cutter right now, and we'll set this out of the way for the moment, and unplug my tool before I take it out. Bring it out in position here, and take out the router bit that we've got in here, and put in another one. We're going to use a round over bit, just to knock off the edges. You want to make sure that the handle hole and the pieces that we're using inside are going to be easy to feel and hold on to it. Just sort of finishes off your project when you go ahead and round off all the edges that are required to be rounded over. Make sure that you don't round edges off that have joinery on it. And if you have trouble with that, you might want to hand put it together and put X's on all the places where you don't want to round it over, or you do. You make the decision on what you want to do. You just make sure that when you work out a system, that it's the right system. Let's take a look at this bit here now. I'll just get it in place first and get myself positioned, and I'll show it to you. There it is there, and all it is a quarter round over. And that's all. We're just going to knock off the edges, similar to what the other parts are. Now, let's bring it back up here. I've identified that I don't want to round it over down on the bottom here, so we're going to just start on the inside and round over our pieces. While I'm doing that, let's check and see what Dad's doing with his parts.
I've got a 1/4-inch router bit chucked up in here, and when I say 1/4 inch, it's a 1/4-inch round over, and it does have a 1/4-inch radius in it. The shank is 1/4 in this case in it, but it also has a bearing on it, and I'm going to need that to round these wheels. So when you set the depth on it, just make sure you show the full profile of the cutter. And I'm looking right down the base plate so I can see, and I'll lock it up in here in place. And then we need to do is stuff this cord down inside. And I'll get it down where I don't have to reach for it, then I'll bring it into place. Now, anytime when we round anything, we usually like to use a safety pin, and we will. And on the outside, we're going to use the safety pin. And the pin sits inside of here and locks down, and it gives you that option because that bit is turning that direction. It wants to take it away from you. So when you've got it set up in here like that, that'll prevent it from doing anything it wants to do because you're up against the pin. However, I'm only going to use it on the outside of the wheel, and I'm going to start inside, so I'll start like that. And make sure when you do that you start into the rotation of the bit and feed it around. And you can lift it off, go to the next one. And you see I got 5 of these holes to do on each side.
Now it's time for Tips from the Workshop, Viewer Mail, and Tricks of the Trade on Rotorbit's Tips and Wood Chips.
Making wheels. Some of the most important parts about the wheel is where the stress points are, where you can get yourself set up here where it can crack or break. A way to prevent that? Let's just sandwich a piece of plywood in between the 2 pieces that you need to use to make your wheels. All right, I got the pieces done.
You got a lot of pieces
That's
here.
right. Let's just sit them back in here. I bet you this is going to fit.
Well, this is the neat thing in here, Rick, that we did put the groove in here, and then we got that.
Now let's just put her in place. And that piece is in place. How about your side pieces?
Why don't I just put that down up to your piece like that?
Have you got the wheels?
These are the little bins for those little cables to go.
Glue those in place.
Now, this piece screws on the outside. The reason we use plywood in here, a lot of strength in it, and that's where the wheel is bearing on. Now when we bring the wheel up, the wheel will fit over that, and it'll raise that cart up off of the floor there to let the wheel guide it. And we can give Rick another one. He doesn't have anything to hold anyway.
Great. We got it all dry fit and ready to go. That's it, folks, but we'll be back next time for another fun project right here in the Router Workshop.
We'd like to hear from you. You can email us at the address on your screen. Send your comments, questions, or project ideas to The Router Workshop, Post Office Box 608, Chamberlain, South Dakota 57325. Or in Canada, The Router Workshop, Post Office Box 280, Ely, Manitoba ROH-OHO. To learn more about The Router Workshop, visit us at the internet address on your screen. Next time in The Router Workshop, Bob and Rick Rosendahl craft some of the most unusual trivets you've ever seen. Rick shows you how to make a jig for cutting perfect square trivets and adds a decorative mold to the top and bottom. The old master shows you how to make a jig and cut beautiful round trivets that are sure to be a hit at craft shows everywhere. That's all on Trivets, Trivets, Trivets. Next time in The Router Workshop. Funding for The Router Workshop is provided in part by Hitachi Power Tools, manufacturers of a full range of construction and woodworking power tools. You can now order router bits, tips, and wood chips, a 45-minute video featuring Bob and Rick Rosendahl's personally selected shop tips and router techniques. To order your copy of this home video for $19.95 plus $4.95 shipping and handling, have your credit card ready and call 1-800-803-1449.